This is Stephanie, just an ordinary girl in Caracas, Venezuela. Her world revolves around school, friends, and family, nothing out of the ordinary. Like many her age, she spends her afternoons walking the streets of her neighborhood, laughing with friends, and running simple errands for her parents. But lately, something feels off. Today she enters her local store to buy milk, just like she always has. But the price is double what it was last week. She shrugs it off and heads home, where she finds her father, more worried than usual. She asks what's wrong, but silence. The weight of something unspoken lingers in the air. Hours later, she's shaken from her sleep by urgent whispers. Her mother and father stand over her, faces heavy with fear. They don't have much time. Stephanie's story is not unique. In a country once filled with promise, millions of Venezuelans now face the same question. How did we get here? This is the story of a nation once rich in resources, hope, and opportunity fell into despair. A story of political corruption, greed, and the devastating consequences of power in the wrong hands. To understand how we reached this moment, we must first travel back in time to a Venezuela very different from the one Stephanie knows today. There was a time when Venezuela stood as a beacon of prosperity in Latin America. In the mid-20th century, the country was a symbol of wealth and stability, a period when oil turned the nation into an economic powerhouse. At the heart of this transformation was oil. Beneath Venezuela lay one of the largest oil reserves in the world. By the 1970s, oil accounted for over 90% of the country's export revenue, driving the economy forward. The wealth from oil allowed the government to invest in infrastructure, education, and even healthcare. It wasn't long before Venezuela was one of the wealthiest nations in Latin America. In 1976, Venezuela took a bold step by nationalizing its oil industry, meaning that the government took ownership of any existing oil companies. In 1960, it became a founding member of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum and Exporting Countries. During this time, oil-producing countries were underpaid. The goal was to stop big Western oil companies from controlling the oil prices and underpaying for oil. But beneath all this prosperity was a hard reality starting to unfold. Venezuela's reliance on oil was growing stronger every year. By the late 1970s, the cracks in the economy were starting to show. OPEC worked by limiting how much oil each country produced to control supply. But some of the countries, including Venezuela, cheated by pumping more oil to make extra money. This made it harder to control prices. Despite the country's riches, the benefits of this health weren't equally shared. The oil wealth was centered around the big cities. City jobs were tied to oil, finance, media, and even politics. So the middle and upper classes benefited directly. As oil revenue soared, Venezuela imported food instead of supporting local farmers. This left rural communities with fewer jobs, poor services, and less investment. In addition, a lot of the oil money was used to reward political allies. Corruption meant that the money didn't trickle down to poor regions. It got stuck at the top, and programs that were meant to help the poor were often poorly managed. It was in this environment that a new kind of leader would emerge, a leader who promised to redistribute wealth. His name? Hugo Chávez. Chavez, much like Stephanie, was shaped by the promise and disappointment of Venezuela's golden era. He saw the cracks in the system that once promised prosperity, and soon he would rise to power to offer a new vision for Venezuela, one that would forever change the nation's history. Hugo Chavez was born into a world of modest means. On July 28, 1954, in a small rural town called Sabaneta, Chavez's journey began. His parents were school teachers, living a simple life like many Venezuelans at the time. The plains, or llanos, where Chavez grew up were vast and open, but the opportunities for those living there were narrow. His upbringing was marked by hardship. Raised by his grandmother, Chavez understood from an early age what it meant to go without. His parents, struggling to make ends meet, often had to leave him in the care of others. During these years, he watched his family work tirelessly. This shaped his deep empathy for the poor and fueled his desire to do something about it. Chavez, like many children across Venezuela, had big dreams. His first passion wasn't even politics, but baseball. Growing up, he would play for hours, dreaming of a future in baseball. But despite all of his skill and dedication, it just wasn't meant to be. Chavez soon found himself drawn to the military. For many young men like him, the military was a way out. But for Chavez, it offered more than just a way out. It was a platform that he could use to shape the future of his country. His time at the military was transformative. Chavez studied history, politics, and the writings of Simón Bolívar, the 19th century leader who fought hard to free Latin America. Bolívar's vision of a united Latin America resonated with Chavez. This was the beginning of his revolutionary ideas. In 1992, along with a group of loyal military officers, he attempted to overtake the president, but failed. Chavez was arrested and jailed, but he went on TV and took responsibility, ending with his famous line,
Por ahora, los objetivos que nos planteamos no fueron logrados en la ciudad capital. Es decir,
por ahora, for now. This line made him instantly famous. In just a few seconds of national TV, people saw him as honest, brave, and willing to fight corruption. Many poor Venezuelans were suffering under a broken system and saw Chavez as one of them. But prison didn't break Chavez. Instead, it gave him time to reflect, and it only strengthened his ideas. When Chavez was finally released from prison, he found that his time behind bars had transformed him into a national figure. People began to see him as a leader. In 1998, Chavez ran for president. His message was simple but powerful. He promised to end the corruption that had plagued Venezuela for decades and to redistribute the country's wealth. He spoke of a new Bolivarian revolution for the poor and to bring justice. Much like Stephanie, Chavez had lived the struggles of the ordinary Venezuelan. He had seen firsthand what poverty could do. His connection to the people was real. He didn't speak down on them, he spoke as one of them. Chavez was charismatic. His speeches were fiery, emotional, but filled with promises of a better future. On December 6, 1998, Hugo Chávez was elected as the president of Venezuela. His campaign victory was clear, winning by 56.2%. During his presidency, poverty was cut in half. He used the oil money to fund social programs like free healthcare, free education, free food. Millions of people who had been ignored by the government finally felt seen. But as we all know, good things don't last forever. During Chávez's presidency, he poured almost all of Venezuela's wealth into social spending, leaving the country with no backup plan. He nationalized over 1,000 private companies, including farms and factories, many of which failed under government control. This had killed local production and increased a dependency on imports. And finally, in 2014, the inevitable happened. Oil prices dropped from $100 a barrel to under $50. The US was the largest consumer of oil globally, but in the 90s, new technology allowed it to drill its own oil. Production in the US nearly doubled, and with higher supply came lower demand. Remember that deal with Saudi Arabia and OPEC? Well, they cheated. They didn't want to lose money by limiting their own supply, so they simply just kept selling more. This only increased the supply and lowered the prices even more. Chavez didn't see the crash as a flaw in his system. He saw it as an attack on his revolution. With less oil income and no budget, it started printing money to pay for things. This led to hyperinflation, where prices doubled almost daily. By 2018, inflation was over 1 million%. To put this into perspective, the average gallon of milk costs $3.50. Next week, it's $7. 2 weeks later, it's $15. And 6 months later, it's $10,000. Money lost value every day, sometimes by the hour. A dozen eggs were worth a month's salary. People carried money in trash bags and still didn't have enough to buy essentials. Hyperinflation made Venezuela's money worthless. Prices skyrocketed so fast that people couldn't keep up. Admitting failure would mean admitting that the socialist experiment didn't work. Capitalism was the enemy. So when the economy started collapsing, he blamed everyone but himself. People began asking questions about the oil money, why hospitals were collapsing, and why food was so expensive. When Chavez didn't have the answers, he did what every dictator does when the truth gets too loud. He censored it. On May 28, 2007, a group of college students tuned in to RCTV, a popular news station where people watch shows and hear national news. Something seems to be off. There's nothing but static. This can't be right. They check other television sets, only to see the same thing. They don't know it yet, but the government shut down the channel the night before, ending its 53 years of service. This causes uproar. Students from across the country take to the streets to protest the censorship. The government responds with tear gas, rubber bullets, and water cannons. Many students are killed. Independent media outlets were shut down. Journalists were arrested. Venezuela wasn't just struggling, it was under a full-blown dictatorship. As Chavez got older, his health began to decline. The once charismatic leader was now visibly weakened. He knew his time was running out, and with the revolution unfinished, he needed someone he could trust to take his place. Among his closest allies was Nicolás Maduro, a man who had risen from humble beginnings as a bus driver. Maduro had long been a vocal supporter of Chávez's ideals, and their relationship had grown over the years. Despite lacking military experience, something many of Chávez's other confidants had, Maduro's deep connection with the working class made him stand out, and Chavez admired Maduro's ability to connect with people. On December 2012, just before his final surgery, Chavez made his choice public. He named Nicolás Maduro as his successor. Behind the scenes, Maduro and his politicians lived in a bubble. While the average person was starving, elites and officials lived in luxury. They had access to US dollars, while regular people were stuck with worthless money. They had imported goods, private supermarkets, and even free health clinics. Some even built mansions in other countries while their citizens ate from trash cans. In one case, military officers were caught diverting millions of dollars intended for food into their personal bank accounts. The effects of corruption were devastating. As inflation soared and goods disappeared from stores, daily life had become a struggle. Stephanie, once a normal schoolgirl, now found herself caught in the chaos. Her family, like millions of others, watched hopelessly as their savings were wiped away by hyperinflation. By 2017, it had become the worst economic crisis in the world. Poverty affected over 90% of the population. People like Stephanie, who had once dreamed of an opportunity, were now fleeing the country. The United States, the European Union, and other global powers imposed harsh sanctions on Venezuela. This barred the government's access to foreign assets and even the oil industry, and it further isolated it from the international markets. For Venezuelans, international sanctions were just another layer of hardship in an already unbearable situation. Maduro's reign marked the final chapter in the destruction of Venezuela. The struggle for survival continues as a new generation fights for a better future. By 2023, more than 7 million Venezuelans had fled their country. Most sought refuge in neighboring countries like Colombia, Brazil, and Peru. Through the chaos, the world has not remained silent as Venezuela continues to suffer under Maduro's regime. In recent years, key international figures have become outspoken about the crisis, including Salvadorian President Nayib Bukele and billionaire Elon Musk, both of whom have used their platforms to bring attention to the cause. Many governments, including the United States, the European Union, and a number of Latin American countries, refuse to recognize Maduro's legitimacy. Over 50 countries worldwide do not acknowledge him as a rightful leader and demand free and fair elections. Throughout this, the Venezuelan people have not lost hope. With the world watching and a new generation determined to reclaim their future, Venezuela may one day become free and prosperous. If you like videos like these, make sure to like and subscribe. We're new here and need all the support that we can get.